Hey, everybody. Welcome into the channel. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you're not already subscribed, please be sure to do that. Like the video, do all that YouTube stuff. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Today, I was getting ready for the NFL Combine. I'm going to be leaving here within like the next 40 minutes. And I was, fully prepared to, get out of here by noon-ish. And then the news that Albert Breer put out in his MMQB takeaways that he does every week. A report, or in his MMQB takeaways, reports that teams have reached out to the Rams, and it's the expected teams that you would expect throwing their hats in the ring. And he says that amongst the teams that have shown interest are New York Giants, Las Vegas Raiders, Cleveland Browns, and Pittsburgh Steelers for Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford. And it kind of backs up, it kind of validates what a lot of people were thinking in terms of the Steelers having interest in Matthew Stafford and trying to get something done for him. And now we kind of wait, because obviously a deal can't be done until the new league year begins. And once that does take place, we're going to find out real quick who the Steelers quarterback is going to be, because they can't afford to just sit and wait. If Justin Fields hits the open market and the interest is real between he and the Jets, maybe something gets done quick there if the Steelers aren't going to be either quick enough to give any sort of rebuttal, or if he just really likes the opportunity to play for Aaron Glenn in New York and be the unquestioned starter, maybe he goes there right away. I don't think the Russell Wilson project is going to continue. I think his time in Pittsburgh is done regardless. But if the Steelers don't go into the new league year with the thought of, okay, yeah, we're going to bring back Justin Fields, or we're going to try to cut something to bring him back. If they go into this with Skylar Thompson as their only quarterback on the roster, it kind of signifies, all right, our sights are set on Matthew Stafford, and that's our goal. And if they don't get him, that's a big risk to run, because there's not going to be many more options out there. Plus, if you do that, you let Fields hit the open market, you don't get Stafford, you try to circle back around. I mean, if I'm Justin Fields in that situation, I'm going to feel like, the second option, which, it's a business, and I'm sure he understands that. But, if you could go to a place where you're wanted more and, are going to be the unquestioned starter, then maybe that's a route that he would rather go. Again, it's the Jets, though, so maybe that's something that he takes into consideration. But again, maybe he wants to play for Aaron Glenn. Maybe he wants to throw passes to Jarrett Wilson. Maybe he wants to have that really good defense on the other side. And again, it is the Jets, and they just seem to have this endless curse attached to them and dysfunction. But when it comes to players wanting to be able to seize an opportunity or get an opportunity, they're going to believe in themselves to maybe turn that ship around. And I think that's a lot of the mindset for players, especially quarterbacks. Like, man, if I can help turn the Jets around, then I'll be remembered forever. So it's something that the Steelers are going to have to weigh when thinking about this. Because with Stafford, he's 37, and there's inherent pros and cons with that. The pros are that he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And if you can get him for 2 or 3 years still playing at an upper tier level, then that's great. You give yourself a nice window to try to build around that and make a run at a Super Bowl, similar to what the Rams did. Now, they were in a better spot than the Steelers are now, because they, went to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. But in the years after that, they realized, yeah, this guy, we need something better. And so they made the move for Matthew Stafford, which a lot of people at the time were like, I mean, why do that? And then other people like me were like, yeah, that's a great move. So if you look at the Steelers, you can look at them and say, all right, they made the playoffs last year with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, but clearly there's a low ceiling on that. But you make a move for Matthew Stafford, that could elevate their ceiling. And right now, fans just want a playoff win right now. I don't think anybody going into this offseason is expecting a Super Bowl for the Steelers in 2025. But if the first step is, all right, we're going to go make a big splash and get Matthew Stafford to set ourselves up for the next few years. Step one of that is obviously, okay, win a playoff game, end this 8-year drought. But it also raises the ceiling of how far you can go. Now, it can't be the only move you make, obviously. You got to get at least one more receiver on the outside for George Pickens. You got to add to the depth of that too, because even if they also bring over like Cooper Kupp, well, that's cool. You got George Pickens and Cooper Kupp, but you need more than just that. Calvin Austin's a fun piece, but you would need to add at least one more like quality receiver to that. Got to figure out what you're doing at running back. My guess is, they're going to keep Jaylen Warren around. He's a restricted free agent. I would highly anticipate he's going to be the starting running back next year. And whether they add a veteran in free agency or they draft somebody, they got to figure out what they're going to do there. Got to add a piece on the defensive line. Got to fix the secondary because the cornerback room isn't good outside of Joey Porter Jr. And plus, like, Dante Jackson's going to be a free agent. So even if, he was still there, you'd still have to make those adjustments. But they got a lot of things to fix. It's not like last year where everybody looked at the roster and was like, yeah, I mean, if they get a quality quarterback, they can maybe make a little bit of a run and win a playoff game. They got to the playoffs. They started off 10-3, and then we know how it ended. But if you're Pittsburgh right now and you can get Matthew Stafford, then yeah, I think you absolutely do it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, they're not a quarterback away. Well, that's what free agency and the draft is for. And so if you can pull off something like that, if you can get the quarterback, then get the quarterback. That's the hardest thing to get. Everything else is easier to get than the quarterback. And we can't sit here and say, oh, man, we want the Steelers to be aggressive and be competitive, but then at the same time say, nah, they shouldn't go get this really good quarterback. That just makes no sense. It cancels itself out. So if you can go and get Matthew Stafford, then yeah, go and get Matthew Stafford. Because even if they trade a first-round pick, I think it would be a pick swap where you move down 5 spots in the first round, you give up a pair of 2s. That's more than worth taking the swing. Because what are you going to take in the next 2 second rounds that's going to be more impactful than Matthew Stafford? Probably nothing. So if you can get Matthew Stafford, then you get Matthew Stafford. And if you can throw in a day 3 pick to bring Cooper Kupp in as well, then do it. Fix the money stuff, do some restructuring and whatnot. I'll leave that to, the capologist to figure out how to do it. But if the Saints can go into every offseason $80 million over the cap and still figure it out, the Steelers can rework a few million. Extend TJ Watt to spread out that cap hit, maybe restructure a Cam Hayward. Like, there's plenty of things that they can do to free up money. And they've already started doing that by releasing Preston Smith. There's plenty of other cuts they can make. There's plenty of restructures, extensions that they can do to make it work. But again, you can't sit here and say, oh man, I really want the Steelers to try and be more competitive and be more aggressive, and then push back on the idea of adding Matthew Stafford, a guy who, even at age 37, we're seeing nowadays where quarterbacks just play longer, and he's a guy who is still playing at the top of his game. So if you can add Matthew Stafford, it makes no sense to at least not try it. And again, according to Albert Breer, the Steelers are one of several teams that have shown interest. That is his exact wording, and shown interest in making the move to get Stafford to be a member of the Steelers. And if they can do that, it makes all the sense in the world to do that. There's a few comments here, so I'll get to these real quick. Tony says, give the Rams whatever they want. Get 2 receivers with the picks you have left with 0 technique and corners mixed in. I think, I don't know about whatever they want. Again, I think if there's a first-round pick involved, it's a first-round pick swap. So they would give the Rams 21. The Rams would give the Steelers 26. And then you trade your second-round pick this year and maybe a conditional 2 next year that can maybe become a 1. But I think, CBS Sports kind of did the mock-up of it. It's going to be similar to what the Aaron Rodgers trade to the Jets was. So I think that's more than fair. And if you're a Steelers team that, feels like you're close enough to at least compete in the AFC to win playoff games, then yeah, going and getting Matthew Stafford makes a lot of sense. G-Man says, personally, I feel they're better off signing back Fields and see if he can be your future next season. If not, then you take your quarterback of the future in 2026 in what is considered a better class. I don't think trading for Stafford is the answer, especially giving up future draft picks. I wouldn't be upset if the move is bringing back Justin Fields for the reasons that you just pointed out. And it's something that I've been harping on throughout the course of the last few weeks as well, where, yeah, you sign Fields, he's going to be cheaper than just about every other option out there. He was in the system this past year. He played well in the 6 games that he started. You surround him with weapons, with the money that you have. You see if he can be the guy going forward. And if he's not, then yeah, you already have pieces in place for whoever you draft in 2026. Makes perfect sense. I'm not going to argue against that. I will push back against the idea of, and I've said this forever, people like overrate the value of draft picks way too much. There's no guarantee that 2 second-round picks are going to end up being great. We know that Matthew Stafford's very good. And so if you can get him for 2 or 3 years, then yeah, I think that's worth 2 second-round picks. So I'm not necessarily worried about that, especially with how recent second-round picks have turned out for the Steelers. Hi, Juju Smith-Schuster. Hello, Chase Claypool. So if giving up 2 second-round picks and swapping first-round picks is what it takes to get Stafford, then yeah, I'm all in for it because, again, I think that people overrate draft capital way too much. So I think when it comes to it, and again, if you're just joining while watching this live, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated in his weekly MMQB takeaways reports that there are multiple teams that have, and I quote, shown interest in acquiring Matthew Stafford. The Pittsburgh Steelers are one of those teams. Other teams named are the Giants, the Browns, and the Raiders as teams that are throwing their hats in the ring, as Albert Breer said, to try and get Matthew Stafford. So it's something that I think that they should do. I've kind of pounded the table about it over the past few weeks. The best options for them are Stafford and Fields. Those are their best 2 options. They're their best 2 realistic options. Because there's multiple options that are like, I could see it happening. And of those, Matthew Stafford and Justin Fields make the most sense. Stafford, for the reasons I've pointed out already, he's the best available quarterback by a wide margin, still a top 10 quarterback in the league. And if you can get a top 10 quarterback, you go get a top 10 quarterback. Fields, for the reasons that we just talked about after G-Man's comments, which is, yeah, he was in the system last year. He played well. He's not going to be as expensive as Matthew Stafford. And you can see if he's going to be your guy of the future. And if he's not, then at least you have pieces in place going into a 2026 draft, which is expected to be filled with good quarterbacks. So both of those make sense. Any other names, though, like there comes a lot of inherent risks. Like Aaron Rodgers, he's 42. He ain't going to be around for long. And I don't think that he really puts you over the hump too much. He's better than what you had last year. I think he's better than what Russell Wilson showed. And at worst, he's probably even with Justin Fields, but Justin Fields, again, gives you the prospect of he's 25. He has a lot of mobility, that dual threat ability that is coveted in today's NFL. So I think that Fields would still be the better option. Sam Darnold, I don't think that makes a lot of sense because we saw him, become the real Sam Darnold in the final couple weeks of the year. And even so, I think that Sam Darnold's one of those guys who needs to be in a situation where he has a great play caller, great weapons. And in Pittsburgh, frankly, they don't have either of those right now. In Minnesota, he had Kevin O'Connell in his ear. He had Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, a good run game, and a very good defense. In Pittsburgh, like Arthur Smith isn't Kevin O'Connell. You got George Pickens. That's great, but you don't really have much of anything else. And a defense that shows up for the first couple months of the year, and then when December hits, can't seem to get off the field. So I don't think that Sam Darnold makes sense. I don't think that the Steelers' ceiling goes any higher than what it was last year if they bring in Darnold. Nothing against Sam, but I just don't think that he's the answer. Guys like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr I don't think that either of those would be great moves. Credit to Derek Carr, like he played well in the first couple weeks of the year before getting hurt, but I don't know if that's the guy I would necessarily bring in. So I think that Stafford and Fields are by far the 2 best options here. Tony says, I think Deion Walker or Puig from Rebels is the 0 we need. Yeah, I mean, Deion Walker got a lot of love at the Senior Bowl. He's ginormous. It's just a matter of him figuring out how to use that size to his advantage. And seeing him in Mobile, like obviously he raised a lot of eyebrows. So we'll see what comes with what they do in the draft with getting somebody else on the defensive interior. We'll see how that goes. Tony also adds, "What about JJ McCarthy from the Vikings? I know it would cost a lot, but would Minnesota pick up the phone? I don't know. Like if they're not going to bring back Darnold, which I don't think they are. I think their plan is just to roll forward with McCarthy. But at the same time, if they're a team that I would keep an eye on for Stafford as well. They just won 14 games with Sam Darnold. And if you're the Vikings, do you want to say, all right, yep, time to get back to our originally scheduled programming with going to a rookie who might take a little bit to develop? Or do you capitalize on that and say, no, we're going to go get Matthew Stafford and give ourselves another 2 to 3 year window of trying to make a run at a Super Bowl? I think that's what I would do. I wasn't a huge JJ McCarthy guy coming out. I think that he got drafted by handing the ball off. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be some major college football savant. I'm not. But watching Michigan, JJ McCarthy wasn't asked to do a whole lot. So not to say that he can't be good, and I hope that he is. I hope he has a great career. It's just I'm not a huge McCarthy guy. I think that Minnesota is a good spot for him for all the reasons that it was a good spot for Sam Darnold. Got a great play caller, great weapons, a good defense. It's hard for any quarterback to not thrive in those situations, or at least play well. So I think in Minnesota, he would do well. In Pittsburgh, I'm not so sure because the Steelers are just not up to date with a lot of these things. They're not a offensive progressive team. They're kind of stuck in the past. And they need a quarterback who can make just about anything work to take them over that hump. Now, with Fields, it makes sense because we saw him do well in the first 6 weeks. It took a little while. Like the first game against Atlanta, like the numbers weren't great, but he made multiple throws to Pickens. We're like, all right, there's something there. The Denver game, he had that really great pass to Pickens that was called back because of a penalty. And then the game against Indy that they lose, I mean, Fields just goes God mode in the second half, leads them all the way back from down 3 possessions. And if George Pickens doesn't fumble in the red zone in that game, they probably win. And against Dallas, didn't play like great, but led them down the field to take the lead late in the fourth quarter, and that the defense just couldn't get off the field and lost. So I think that Fields' ceiling is being like the 15th best quarterback in football. I think that's his absolute peak. I don't think it's going to go higher than that. And like I said, if you can get Matthew Stafford for, a 2 to 3 year period, a guy who right now is still a top 10 quarterback, surround him with weapons, I think that that's a move that you make. Especially when most of the projected trades around it feature some sort of first round pick swap and then 2 second round picks. That's fine. I'm more than okay with that. And again, a lot of people overrate draft capital. I think that, on paper, it's a lovely idea to have a ton of draft picks, but there's no guarantee that any of them are going to be good. We know that Matthew Stafford's good. And if you want Pittsburgh to be aggressive, going out and trading for a Super Bowl winning quarterback who's still playing really good football, I mean, that's as aggressive as you can get in March. So would love to see it happen. Again, we're going to find out a lot more this week at the NFL Combine. Again, I'm leaving for Indianapolis today. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel on YouTube, again, youtube.com/@JBaileyNFL, I'm going to be giving live reports from the Combine. So I'll be at Omar Khan's presser, be at Brandon Beane's presser. I'm going to try to make it to as many as possible, but those are the two I'm really focused on. I mean, if you know me, you know where my coverage kind of centers around, and that's the Steelers and the Bills. So I'll be at Omar Khan's presser. I will be at Brandon Beane's presser. I will give live reports after both and tell you my thoughts on it, kind of what I think the direction that both franchises are going in. So be sure to subscribe for all of that. A lot of stuff coming during Combine week. Talking to a lot of prospects this week as well. I mean, there's going to be over 300 players in Indy this week. So a lot of content coming on here. So potential Steelers draft picks that I'll be speaking to, Omar Khan's presser. So subscribe to the channel and keep listening to the podcast for all of that coverage. But yeah, the big news of the day is that the Steelers listed as a team who are, and I quote, showing interest in quarterback Matthew Stafford, and that's from Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated in his weekly MMQB takeaways piece, listing Pittsburgh amongst the teams that are interested in trading for Matthew Stafford. And again, it's a move that would make a lot of sense on the Steelers front, and then they would really have to take advantage of whatever money they have left and the draft to get some quality pieces in that can contribute right away. So hopefully this comes to fruition. Obviously, like, this is my preferred option. Justin Fields would be a number 2 that I wouldn't be upset about at all. But Matthew Stafford, Justin Fields, that seems to be the 1 or 2 that the Steelers are really honing in on in terms of who's going to be their quarterback in 2025. If I had to guess who the third option would probably be Aaron Rodgers. But I think their top 2 options right now in terms of who they want is Stafford and Fields. And again, if you can get a top 10 quarterback, then you get a top 10 quarterback, because it's the hardest thing in the NFL to find. Hardest thing in sports to find is a good quarterback. So if you can do that, then you do it and you figure out the rest, because the rest is a lot easier to figure out and to add to the roster than finding the quarterback. So hopefully they can find a way to get it done. And again, try to end this playoff drought that we've been talking about now for the last 2 years. And try to add pieces to get this thing done. So, and look, they've been centered around conversations for guys like Deebo Samuel as well. And I think in a system like Arthur Smith's, Deebo Samuel could actually be a fine fit. Like, you could scheme open touches for him, short passes where he can just get the ball in his hands and make plays after the catch, which is the best aspect of his game. So, I mean, if they go into 2025 with Matthew Stafford, George Pickens, and Deebo Samuel, with Jaylen Warren leading back in the backfield, I can get excited for that. I think that would be pretty solid. It's a hell of a lot better than where they were last year. So I would be very intrigued in that. So again, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please be sure to do that. If you're listening as a podcast, leave a review. And again, tune in for the rest of the week, because there's going to be a lot of on-site coverage at the NFL Combine from me, a lot of Steelers coverage, a lot of Bills coverage, Omar Khan's presser, Brandon Beane's presser, tons of conversations with prospects. So it's going to be a busy, busy week at the NFL Combine. Be sure to subscribe for everything that is coming. I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and I will see you very soon with lots of on-site coverage from the NFL Combine. Until then, take care.